Angela Rayner could be the next Prime Minister. Right now, the bookies have her just behind Nigel Farage as the second favourite for the role. And if Keir Starmer doesn't make it to the next general election, it's quite likely the Stockport MP will be taking the reins. Until today, Rayner was a long-standing member of Unite the Union, as well as Unison and the GMB. No more, however. And that's because Unite's conference today passed a motion to suspend the membership of the Deputy Prime Minister. As well as that, the union passed a motion to reconsider its ties with Labour over the party's handling of the Birmingham bin workers' strike. Helena, I'm intrigued to know what you think about this story. There's two parts to it, of course. There's the symbolism of Rayner having her membership suspended as a Unite member. And there's the fact that actually Labour may be seeing a massive dip in financial support from a major trade union, the biggest private sector trade union in this country. Firstly, do you think Unite could actually disaffiliate? Secondly, will Angela Rayner care about all of this?
I mean, when it comes to the Angela Rayner part specifically, it remains to be seen at the moment how momentous it is. Now, of course, it's an incredibly big statement, but there's two ways that this could go. First of all, it could just be a shot across the bows, right? It could just be Unite essentially saying, "Oi, Labour, get your act together," right? This is the first warning that we're giving you about the breakdown in the relationship between Unite and Labour, which, to be fair, has been a long time coming. Or it could be the very first kind of creaking of this relationship and the first straw before the camel's back breaks, right? It really could be the first domino to fall in terms of the trajectory that we're already going in. I think that it's the latter. I think that it's closer to the latter than the former, but it could still go either way, because this isn't just anybody. As you pointed out, it's the deputy leader, but it's especially poignant given that she's the deputy leader who's basically the only one who has real ties to the union movement at all, who's in the cabinet. So most of the cabinet is full of Labour right types. It's full of people who are professional politicians who haven't held trade union roles, who have no relationships with the trade unions, and are there because they were previously parliamentary staffers or were people from think tanks or from charities or whatever. So none of these people have any actual deep ties to the trade union movement apart from Angela Rayner. So that being essentially the conduit between the Labour leadership and the trade union movement more broadly in the form of Angela Rayner, them going as far as suspending her from Unite, that's really big, because that shows that they are not here to play. They really do mean business. And the fact that I think that this means it's a really big breakdown rather than just a warning shot here is because why would they, if they still wanted to maintain some level of influence within Labour, cut ties with basically the only person who they can influence within the cabinet? So that's why I think that it is the start of an ongoing breakdown between Unite and Labour. And furthermore, there's obviously a material basis to it. What does the Unite get out of being affiliated to Labour? Anyway, what do they get out of this? When it comes to the bin strikes, right, how can a Labour government, any government that even says that it stands up for working people, how on earth can they justify £8,000 pay cuts to some workers, right? That is beyond the pale, especially since it's a Labour council and affiliated trade union. It makes it all the more damning, what's happening with the bin strikes in Birmingham. So the people who work incredibly hard and do jobs that many of us would not want to do, seeing a Labour government wanting for them to accept huge pay cuts really is beyond the pale. But this goes further. It goes further than just the bin strikes, right? When it comes to the Labour Party's broader economic paradigm, when we've been talking about Labour's policy platform, we spoke with this with Carla Denyer when she guested on the show a month or so ago, that a bunch of workers who should be getting taken with the government in the Greens transition are being left behind. And a lot of these people are represented by people like Unite in the kind of industries that are going to go away as a part of that transition. You look at Grangemouth, for example. Unite the Union have called out Labour multiple times over people at Grangemouth losing their jobs. And have Labour actually put in the stones to go and do some industrial policy to try and make sure that there are jobs and training and all the things necessary for a just transition for these workers? No, they haven't. And these are workers who really do want a just transition. They understand that their jobs are on the firing line during this transition towards a greener economy, and they want the government to provide them with training. They don't want to have to continue working with fossil fuels, but the government hasn't put up the stones to actually give the investment available to keep that stuff going or to give them somewhere else to go. So it's going to be another case of Port Talbot. It's going to be another case of the coal mines where communities have been left to rot because the government doesn't want to do industrial policy properly. UK Steel is another thing as well, right? When it came to the Scunthorpe Steelworks, also represented by the trade union Unite, they couldn't even do a proper nationalisation. They just had a government plan to essentially pay for the raw materials to keep the blast furnaces open, while allowing Jingye to technically still own the company. They said, Jonathan Reynolds was the business secretary, said, well, nationalisation might have to happen, but we don't want it to happen. It's like they're still living in this new Labour world where you can't do any nationalisation or industrial policy properly because that's not seen as serious politics. And whilst I can have at least some level of sympathy with a bunch of the people who said that New Labour were a product of their time, the world was neoliberal and they had to work within that paradigm to be successful, I would disagree with them, but I at least have some sympathy for that viewpoint. You look at, for example, in Australia, where during the neoliberal turn in the 80s, they had a Labour government, they had Hawke and Keating, and they didn't go as far as people like Thatcher, which is why they have better workers' rights and a better relationship between unions and politicians over there than they do here. And so there could have been a different change there, but at least New Labour were trying to do the things that they thought was politically feasible for them at the time. Whereas with the Starmerites, with the Labour right at the moment, they're shying away from things like nationalisation and large-scale industrial policy, not because they think that that's the world we live in, because it clearly isn't. We clearly are living in a world of industrial policy. Look at what happened with Biden and the Chips and Science Act and the tariffs on Chinese vehicles, for example. Even the most neoliberal country in the world, like the big bad boss of neoliberalism, the United States, even they are trying to do proper industrial policy, and we are lagging behind. And it's not because they feel like that's the world we're living in, it's because they just think of it being left-wing politics. They have coded all of their political policy in opposition to the left, and that's left them adrift in a changing world where policy should be radically different to what we've seen over the last 45 years. And that's another reason why they're going to fail and why Unite are less likely to back them. There's also another problem that Unite have in terms of being affiliated to the Labour Party. Lots of their members support Reform UK. This is a real problem. You had a member of Unite on your show a few months ago. Sorry, we had someone on Unite a few months ago. I think you're speaking to you specifically, talking about how there are loads of people on the shop floor who are being won over by Reform UK, who are trying to focus on different issues other than industrial policy, and whilst also looking towards steel nationalisation as well. We saw Nigel Farage standing on the lines with the steel workers during the steel crisis, and this means that there are probably plenty of Unite members who aren't wanting to disaffiliate from Labour just because they disagree with the direction of the government, but because they have moved their affiliation away from Labour politics more broadly. And that rise in support will only make it weaker as a link moving forward. And I will be interested to see what happens when Sharon Graham comes up for re-election, or if indeed she pivots towards more of where the base in the Unite the Union is right now.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about there. I mean, we've got other stories to cover, but I think this is really key. On the steel point, it was very simple politics to bring the steel into public ownership. I've said this so many times. We're spending £60 billion a year on defence. The government wants to spend £100 billion on defence, and actually more, about £20 billion on what's being called national resilience, which would be the supply chains around the defence industry in this country, around £120 billion. Now, there is no point in having loads of aircraft carriers, loads of F-35s, and nuclear deterrent if the country literally has no steel production, literally has no microprocessor production, literally has the world's most, or some of the world's most expensive industrial energy. But the Starmerites, Keir Starmer, the people around and the Labour right, they cannot put two and two together, because what that means is some kind of public ownership, and that's coded as bad and left-wing, therefore we can't do it. And it makes them completely intellectually unequipped to deal with the challenges of the 21st century. I've seen people say, Taiwan is a free market economy. Why can't we be just like them? Taiwan has TSMC, the world's largest microprocessor manufacturer. It's worth about $1 trillion, that company, slightly under. It had massive involvement from the state, the Taiwanese state, to build that company. It wasn't state-owned, but had massive Taiwanese involvement. The same with Samsung and South Korea. Our political class is not ready for that conversation. If you want big industrial juggernauts like TSMC in the 21st century, you're going to need big involvement from the government.
Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.